My name is Bob Sander, and my occupation is I'm a professional storyteller.
When did you become a storyteller?
I think that when I became a storyteller full-time, as my full-time occupation was in 1988, but I'd been doing some storytelling before that into the late 1970s, early 1980s.
And what did you want to be when you grew up?
Meaning, when I was a child,
Yes.
did I have
Did you have
some firm idea in my mind about what I wanted to become? Well, I never did. I think when I was a young child, I had some notion of becoming a marine biologist. My aunt lived in Florida, and we talked about it. It sounded interesting, but I really didn't know much about it. And so, unlike those kids who say, I want to be a doctor, and they grow up and become a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer or a fireman or whatever it might be, I never really had a firm vision in my head of what I wanted to do. I studied creative writing. English literature was my major, but I was mostly interested in creative writing. After college, there was a recession right after I got graduate from college, and there weren't many jobs available. I was kind of casting around thinking, what could I do? I wanted to write. That was difficult to do in any way that provided enough money to make a living. I racked up some debt from bills I had, dental bills, and my parents heard of a job unrelated to anything that I had ever thought about or trained for, and it was working kind of with some accounting and inventory control at a big factory, and because I needed the money, I decided to do that work for a while. And off and on, maybe I did that for 6 or 7 years, always wanting to leave it. Any spare moment, spare time on the job, always writing poems, stories, songs. And then when I finally did leave that job, there was a day of duress. I was in the factory and there was an explosion. And the explosion blew dust particles and tiny shards of metal every which way. And even though I had safety glasses on and a uniform and a helmet, the particles were ejected with such force they went into my eyes. And for about an hour, I thought maybe I was blind. And as I lay there with people trying to flush out my eyes, I thought, that's it. No matter how poor I live, from now on, I'll never work at something that doesn't feed my innards, my soul, my greater sense of purpose. If I have to be poor, I will, and I'm not sure what it is that I'm going to do, but I'm not going to do this anymore. After that, I tried becoming a professional beekeeper, and I loved keeping bees. Kind of got bigger than a hobby, but too small to be a business. And it was very hard work for a single person. So I kind of moved from that into rehabbing a house with a friend. I learned a lot of skills then. It was enjoyable work. It wasn't a lifetime of work, wasn't a career. And after that, I met a woman in Indianapolis who became a business partner to me. And the two of us opened up a relaxation center that utilized flotation tanks, sensory deprivation tanks. And even though we were complete and total strangers, we met, and this is not good advice for a business, but we had a good feeling about each other and took whatever monies we had and went together and had a wonderful time running a business together for maybe 5 years. Well, my next step was someone else walked into that place of business and asked what I was always doing writing behind that desk. And I said, I'm writing stories, and she wanted me to read one to her. I read it. She told me the story seemed pretty average, which I didn't think was a compliment, but then she said, but I love the way you read the story. Maybe you should be a storyteller, which meant absolutely nothing to me, but she took me to see a professional storyteller, and pretty much at first introduction, I was hooked. I wanted to do that. I didn't think it'd be a career. I began doing it for fun, kind of volunteering at first. Then people called and said, could we pay you to do it? And then finally there came a year when it turns out I made more money doing this thing I liked than I did at the business I co-owned.
What advice would you give someone who's about to come out of college and is uncertain about their future? How do you take that first step?
I think it's something we don't do very much, but it's sit down, be quiet, be alone, and really introspect, really think, what do I love? If I could do what I love to do in this world, and somehow that was enough to make me a career, a living, or satisfaction with life. What do you really like? What are you looking for? What do you want? And I mean, that sounds like a simple question, but I don't know if really it's something that we're encouraged to do very much, rather than here's what you're supposed to do. Here's what society expects you to do. Here are the possibilities for you, and we're telling you what they are. But if it comes from inside, if it's intrinsic, if it's something you love, there's that it's kind of an old hackneyed saying, but I think it's pretty true. If you find a job you like, you'll never work another day in your life. I think I'm not saying that quite right.